Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back in the video today. And today I'm going to be talking about why the Houston Texans will be the most surprising team in the NFL this upcoming season. The Houston Texans, who had a great offseason of not only improving the one side of the ball with defense, but also really improving the other side of the ball with offense. Before I get into why the Texans will be way better than people think this year, I'm going to be going over some of the new additions for the Houston Texans. And let's go over that first addition, and that is DeMeco Ryans and all the other coaching staff that he brought with him. This coaching staff is going to be a big help to this, why this Texans team will be better this season. DeMeco Ryans is honestly better than any coach we've had in the past, ever since Bill O'Brien got here. I think DeMeco's way better than O'Brien. I know O'Brien was an offensive coach and DeMeco's a defensive coach, but I think DeMeco will lead the defense for us way better than O'Brien ever led the offense. And I think DeMeco will be outstanding. And some of the staff he has brought in, I think is, just fantastic as well. I think he'll be a great head coach for the Texans. I know Kubiak was a really solid coach here, and there's been a couple other guys that have been, solid, before or after him, before O'Brien came. But I think, DeMeco could, if, the Texans have success with some of the draft picks they have drafted this year, really, really DeMeco could go down as one of the best coaches of all time for the Houston Texans. Moving on from coaching, let's go to some of the players they added in. Let's start with free agency before we get to the draft. And that's it. You got to add in veterans to, the young players that we have. And we've added in some really nice young talent in the last 2 years of each drafts with, 2022 drafting Jalen Petrie and Derek Stingley Jr. for the defense. And then last year drafting John Mechie and Damian Pierce for the offense. And then this season, drafting C.J. Stroud and Tank Dell for the offense and Will Anderson Jr. for the defense, and some other guys for the defense as well, which are not that big draft picks. Henry Tuoto is pretty solid, but that's really it. Let's look at some of the additions. We're gonna go over offensive additions in free agency that they brought in, and one of the favorite additions I love that they brought in free agency was Dalton Schultz. He's a guy who had a great season with Dallas last year, and I think he will be great for this Texans offense. I think he's gonna be a guy that Stroud loves to throw the football to, and I think he'll be a really, really good addition for the Texans. He was really good for Dallas last year. Imagine how better he'll be on a Dallas team on a Houston team that is, that does not have as much as good weapons as Dallas does. We have, I think, a more loaded offense than Dallas had last year. I mean, they have better wide receivers. They have CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. But if you look at talent at wide receiver with depth, I think the Texans had more depth at the wide receiver position than the Cowboys did last year. But with talent, the Cowboys topped the Texans. I'm talking about last year's Cowboys, not this year's Cowboys. But I think Schultz will improve this season. I think he'll be really good for this Texans offense if he stays healthy. Another guy who I really like that we brought in, two running backs I really like that we brought in, Mike Boone from Denver, who has been really good for us during preseason, and then also Devin Singletary, who was the starter for the Buffalo Bills, the second best team in the AFC last year. I mean, I think the running back position, you have Pierce going in his second year, he's improved. They've said that he's lost a lot of weight. He's lost like 15 pounds, and he's going to be way better as a catching back as well, which he was not really that much of a receiving back last year. Was mostly he mostly just rushed the ball. But with C.J. Stroud as the quarterback this year, rumors have it that C.J. is going to be throwing the ball a lot to Damian Pierce, and he's going to be he's going to be getting way more targets in his second year. So I think Pierce is going to be improved. Not only do you have Pierce improving, but also you add in Mike Boone and Devin Singletary for the running backs. That's another thing. And then wide receivers is the final, upgrades to the offense. Another Dallas Cowboy, Noah Brown, who I thought was very underrated for the Cowboys last year. He had a really solid year, stepped up for the Cowboys when they needed him, when Michael Gallup was hurt and when James Washington was hurt, when the Cowboys had some injuries to that wide receiver position. Noah Brown stepped up and did good as that wide receiver too for the Dallas Cowboys, and was good after some guys like Michael Gallup came back from injury. And I really like what you're going to see from him this season. And then Robert Woods. I like him in this offense because you have a bunch of young guys in this wide receiver core, all guys under 26. And then you have Robert Woods, that veteran that's 30 years old and has, been in the league for a long time. This is probably his 8th or 9th season. So I like that. He's still not that bad of a player. He had like 600 or 700 receiving yards last season with 2 receiving yards, two receiving touchdowns on a Tennessee offense, which basically the playbook is give it to Derrick Henry and block. I'm kidding, but at the same time, a lot of the play calling for Tennessee is giving the ball to Derrick Henry, whoever the backup running back. That is how Tennessee's offense mainly is. I mean, I remember watching the Texans game last year against the Tennessee tight ends, and they only threw 11 passes in the ball game and won. While Derrick Henry had like 200-something rushing yards, and the other running back that was rushing had like almost 100. And that was like Malik Willis's first ever game. So they probably will throw it a little bit more with Ryan Tannehill back this season, especially with DeAndre Hopkins, in that offense now, and Treylon Burks going into his second year, even though I do believe he is hurt right now. They'll throw the ball a little bit more this year. At the same time, it's going to be giving the ball a lot to Derrick Henry. And, I don't know. I just feel like Robert Woods on offense, that was his first season coming off an ACL injury, which is a really hard injury to come off of as a wide receiver. It's your first year coming off an ACL injury. You get 700 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns after an ACL injury. And on a Tennessee offense, which they have Derrick Henry and a couple of the running backs, and they basically just, run the ball all the time. I thought Robert Woods had a great year in Tennessee last year, and I think he'll be a great mentor to some of these young guys on the offense as well. And that's really it for the offensive upgrades. They've upgraded that wide receiver position with Robert Woods and Noah Brown in free agency. Nico Collins, who's been here going into his 3rd season, the rumors is that he's really improved for the Texans. John Mechie, who was a draft pick in the 2nd round last year from Alabama, 2022, missed his first season with leukemia. He's expected to, be really good for the Texans this season. I think he's going to be a stud. He's a really good slot wide receiver. I think he'll be really good for the Texans. And then the 2 recent draft picks with Tank Dell and Xavier Hutchinson. Tank Dell has been he's been a stud. He had that amazing catch in the preseason. You might have saw it against the Patriots, the one-hand catch. He's been just killing it in practice for the Houston Texans. The other day had 3 touchdowns in a practice. I don't think it was the joint practice, but it was training camp practice. Had 3 touchdowns from C.J. Stroud. This offense with Stroud at quarterback and, upgraded weapons for C.J. Stroud, upgraded quarterback, upgraded coaching staff for the offensive side, and upgraded offensive line, adding in veteran Shaq Mason, drafting Juice Scruggs, a second year of Kenyon Green when supposedly he's really improved. And he was a first-round draft pick last year. This offense has improved, and this offense was terrible last year. Now getting to the defense. The defense was okay last year. It had the defense had its good moments, but had their bad moments as well. Points per game was a really bad thing for this defense. They were terrible with, giving up points. But the turnovers were good for the defense. The sacks were good for the defense. Those were two stats that this defense actually did really good with. And this defense has improved as well. Let's go over some of the defensive additions they've had. Number 1, with the draft, Will Anderson Jr. He's going to be a stud. Yesterday in the preseason game, had a strip sack for a forced fumble, and that's his first ever sack. And then also had another tackle for loss, taking the running back down for 5 yards. And brought some pressure to Tua Tagovailoa on that play as well. Anderson Jr. yesterday in his second game was a stud, and he's going to be a stud in his first rookie year. Will Anderson Jr. will win Defensive Rookie of the Year for sure. So you added in Will Anderson Jr. You added some talent at the secondary. You added in Jimmy Ward, a stud. He's been a Pro Bowler before, I believe, and he's really, really been balling out. And this during so far in training camp, and he is going to be a stud next to Jalen Petrie, young star for the Texans in the secondary. You have a healthy Derek Stingley Jr., only played the third overall pick in the 2023 NFL and the 2022 NFL draft. He only played 9 games in his rookie year. He is healthy and playing amazing. He is locking up wide receivers in training camp. You also have Steven Nelson, who is going into his second season with the Texans. We signed him last offseason, and he has improved massively for the Texans. He's a guy who has been balling out throughout training camp. You have some other guys on the defense in the defensive line and linebacker that you've added in. You added in Sheldon Rankings at defensive tackle. I think he's going to be a really good addition. You added in Henry To'oTo'o in the draft. You added in Denzel Perryman at linebacker, Pro Bowler. He's looked really good for the Texans so far in the preseason with a sack and an interception in the first 2 games with like 10 tackles. He's looked really good for the Texans. You've added in a couple other solid players to the defense, upgraded at depth with the defense as well. This defense is going to be way better than it was last season. I think their defense points per game almost averaged like 30 points per game, but they were like third or fifth. They were like 5th in sacks, I believe, and then they were like 18th in turnovers, which are decent stats. But you look at those 2 stats. Okay, those stats are good, but then you look at the points per game. That's terrible. That was like we were like 30th in points per game, 29th in points per game. But I think the points per game for this defense will get way better. As long as some of the other stats, I think, turnovers will go up for this defense, especially with having a guy on the defensive line like Will Anderson Jr. and having a loaded secondary as well. This Texans team will be very surprising. And on top of all that, they have an easy schedule. And I could see the Texans winning in the area of 7 to 9 games this season. I really could see the Texans winning 7 to 9 games this season. I know that's not viewed as a great season, but at the same time, this is a team that people are thinking are going to win, at the most 6 games. People think the Texans are going to win like in the area of 3 to 6 games this year. The Texans will not. They have a little bit of an easy schedule. I'm going to go over their schedule with my predictions for their schedule. Week 1 against the Ravens, I think you lose week 1. But week 2 against the Indianapolis Colts, I think you beat the Colts in your home opener. So you're 1-1. Jacksonville Jaguars, you lose in Jacksonville, you're 1-2. Pittsburgh Steelers, this is J.J. Watt's ceremony game. I would say win, but the Steelers are going to be really good this year. You're 1-3. In Atlanta, you get a win on the road. C.J. Stroud's first win on the road, and you're 2-3. Then New Orleans Saints, you're 2-3, but now you're 2-4 with a loss at home against the Saints. Panthers, I think C.J. Stroud has a great game in Carolina and shows the Panthers what they missed out on and shows Bryce Young, hey, I'm the better quarterback, and the Texans get to win 3-4. I don't know if CJ's the better quarterback, but I think CJ goes off in that game in Carolina, and that's after the bye week too. So some time off for CJ after a Saints loss. At home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in November, I think that's another win that's back-to-back wins, and the Texans are 4-4. In Cincinnati, Texans get their ass kicked. I think that will probably be, out of all the games, that will probably be the game that the Texans lose by the most points. Then Arizona Cardinals beat the crap out of the Cardinals. You're 5-5. Jacksonville Jaguars, I think you beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think it's like we haven't been swept by the Jaguars in like almost 10 years or something. I don't think the Texans get swept by the Jaguars. We didn't get swept by the Jaguars last year, and they made the playoffs. We beat them last year in Jacksonville. I think we beat them at home this year, and the Texans go over a game over 500. And I think with this win for the Texans will be the first. This will be the first time the Texans will be over 500. But over the next 2 weeks, the Texans take some losses, losing to the Denver Broncos. And the New York Jets, the Denver Broncos, and the New York Jets at home and on the road. So now you're 1 game under 500 at 6-7. I think you beat Tennessee in Tennessee 7-7. I think Deshaun Watson's revenge game. You lose at home against Cleveland. So now you're 7-8. I think you beat the crap out of Tennessee. They're coming into the NRG Stadium disrespecting the city of Houston, wearing those using those Houston Oilers jerseys. So I think you beat the crap out of them on New Year's Eve. And then for the final game against the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis, that's a game I could see us losing, and I'm probably going to say we lose that game. So honestly, I think you win in the area of 7 to 9 games. I don't see us winning 6. I think we win 7 to 9 games this year, and a little bit of an easy schedule facing the NFC South and some other easier opponents, like facing the Arizona Cardinals and a couple other easy opponents, and some of our opponents in this division, like the Colts and the Titans. I think this will be a very good season for the Houston Texans, and the Texans will be better than everybody thinks and be one of the most surprising teams this season. I don't think we make the playoffs, but I think winning 7 to 9 games is way better than what people think we're going to do, and it's going to be way better than what we did last year. So I'm excited for this season. You guys have your thoughts on the Houston Texans. That's it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace out. Go Texans.